A message to my family is that whatever your job is, that's not the most important thing in life. Your family is. And while I worked many hours, I would take off and go to my kids' concerts, go to their ball games, and try to be there for them. Giving of yourself to your mate and to your children is probably one of the most important things you can do in your life. Because in doing so, you're imparting part of yourself into your kids, and you can see, as in my family, all my kids work hard and work long hours, and I'm like, man, I passed off a bad thing to them. But, you know, they're all three of them successful. I think all three of them are happy, even though they may be in difficult jobs, and they have opportunities ahead of them that will take them to the moon and back. How can somebody live well? Staying within themselves, not trying to be somebody that they're not. You can live well. You can be at peace with yourself, and if you're at peace with yourself, you can be at peace with other people. But when you're trying to keep up with the Joneses or the Smiths or whoever you want to call it, your life's just going to be a battle, and there's no need to be. Just relax and enjoy your life. One of the values I learned as a child was hard work. My father was always very strong that we all work hard. And I think all of my siblings and myself have done that through our lives. You know, happiness is an attitude of the heart. It's not an attitude of the job. And you have to stay positive in your job, no matter how much you may be mistreated or misunderstood or whatever. You just stay focused on the future. You can't let all the outside influences influence you. You have to be above everything around you. My brother, who is 5 years older than I am, was a very good artist. I couldn't draw very well. I wasn't an artist. But in junior high school, in 8th grade, I took a half year of printing and realized that I could create things that would be beautiful. Well, if you'd call printing beautiful. But it was fun taking something, and at times I would design something and give it to the ad agency, and then they would put the art with it, and then we would create it. And it was fun to be able to see that accomplished. Sometimes it involved intricate die cutting, folding, all the different aspects of making something presentable for the public, because we were doing things for a lottery company. So I guess I was helping gambling. I can remember things from when I was 3. Not real vividly, but I remember us watching a black and white TV, and we would put a film over the face of the TV. And of course, since I was the youngest, I didn't get to do the drawing on the TV, but the TV would say, "Oh, quick, draw so-and-so a rope so he can climb off this building." And, you know, to remember that is pretty amazing. And then I guess I was probably 4 or 5. I can remember going to San Diego Zoo, and actually I guess I was 3 or 4 when we went to St. Louis Zoo. And I still remember back then the zoo was almost like a circus. They had an area where they would bring a bear in, and he would ride a motorcycle, and they would have a bicycle, and some other animal would do that, and, you know, elephants would come in and do tricks, and, you know, they'd have acts with lions. So I've had some pretty good vivid memories from way back. Like going to my grandmother's house when I was a kid. She lived down in Oklahoma, and she had a son that was my age, and we would help her deliver newspapers, and I had long hair, which wasn't acceptable in a little Oklahoma town. But we'd wear a hat in the summer, deliver newspapers, and whenever I'd go into a company to deliver their newspaper, I would take off my hat to show respect. And those ladies would tell my grandma, "Your grandson is so respectful." It was hilarious things. But my cousin and I, we had a great time running around Oklahoma. And of course, he had a brother that was my brother's age, 5 years older than us. And we would all get into some difficulties. My grandmother, as I said, had 3 kids at the same time my parents were having kids. She delivered newspapers, Wichita Eagle, Beacon, Blackbird Journal, the Daily Oklahoman, so that they would have money so that they could eat. She had an old house in an old town that was dying, and I don't know how she survived, but she was amazing. And she showed love. She didn't judge. She had gone through a lot. She had had my mom, and her husband ran off, and her older brother called her all kinds of improper names, was disrespectful to her, and I'm not sure how my mom and dad could even go and visit that uncle, but we did when I was a kid. And but I think because of him being so judgmental, my grandmother realized that that wasn't a good way in life. And, you know, she was faithful to go to church every Sunday, and was always loving. And whenever Dairy Queen would have a sale, she would take us to Dairy Queen where we could get a sundae and then get the second sundae for a penny. Learn to read. When I got into junior high school, they realized I didn't know how to read. But the school I originally went to didn't teach phonics. I couldn't figure out how you'd pronounce a word. Even when I got into junior high school, they realized I had a low 3rd grade reading average, if you could imagine that. Being in 7th grade, you can't read. But they put me into a reading English class where I read and read and read and read. But as I read, you take tests and you learned, and I found out that I liked to read, even though it was difficult for me because I didn't understand at that time that those words that I can't see very well because of being dyslexic, I had to take my time and look at each word, and I couldn't just skim them like most people do. I didn't learn to speed read until I was in college. But anyway, teaching a kid, telling a kid, learn to read. As a teenager, the guy that was 3 when I was 8, and we became best of friends, his family went to the Salvation Army church. And I would go with him to church to play basketball. And then I started going to the Salvation Army and found love in God and found out that I could be loved. And that changed my life. So then I spent much of my life seeking a deeper relationship with God through His Son Jesus and communicating with Him. And He and I talk every day. He talks to me. I talk to Him. Prayer's not about us talking to God. It's about us listening to what God speaks to our hearts. God can speak to us. And to me, that is the most important thing in life, is being able to hear. Some people call it your conscience. Your conscience speaks to you, but your conscience can be wrong if you've been twisted. But God is not wrong. He will lead you in the right direction. having a sense of meditation and prayer, you can focus on whatever, but it's good, in my opinion, to focus on things of the Spirit and how you can improve your own self by letting God's Spirit work in you and letting you focus on, whether it's Jesus on the cross, whether it's on the birth of Christ, whether it's Moses receiving the Ten Commandments, whether it's Abraham trying to sacrifice his son, being able to focus on spiritual things of the past can help bring relevance to us in the present. Well, as I mentioned, I was studying printing in high school, but I felt that my calling was to be a pastor. And so when I got out of high school, I moved to Kansas City and worked at as a youth pastor of the Salvation Army, and then wound up going to a Bible college, and I served there. I taught in their college, and then wound up getting a call to go to Lincoln, Nebraska, where we had three wonderful kids. Well, three wonderful kids. And did that for 8 years, but it didn't pay well. And with three kids, we needed more money, so we came to Kansas City where I could get back into printing and make a living. Proud that I've been married here 3 days, 44 years. And proud that I was able to pastor a church for 7.5 years. Proud that I was able to run my business successfully for quite a number of years and still actually have it somewhat going, even though I've closed the facility. But probably the biggest thing I'm proud of is my kids, because their mother's done a lot to make them great. My wife makes the best lasagna. She cooks very well, makes good cakes. And I think some people think that I like cinnamon donuts. That's usually my breakfast every morning. I can buy a bag of donuts, little miniature donuts. There's 21 of them in a bag, $2. I can make 3 meals out of that. I figure that's about as cheap a breakfast as I can buy. So that's what I do. Another real good decision I made was marrying this nice, wonderful lady. She's always been a blessing, even though I've been the curse of her life. I've not always been the best of husbands, but I think I've been a pretty good father. Well, having been married 44 years, my wife and I have gone through our struggles, and we've gone through our good times. But we both make room for each other to make their mistakes and support each other in our personal victories. My wife now likes playing tennis. She's always jogged. She jogged almost all her life. I haven't, because I've always worked a hard physical job. So I got plenty of exercise there. Plus then wiping out your knees, you just can't jog. You can't do some of those. However, I did play sports, which gave me some exercise, but that was always hard on my knees. I always got to suffer the next day. But, love is not an emotion. It's not a feeling. It's commitment. And some people are more committed than others, but you hope that the commitment together comes together and bonds together so that it can be long lasting and you can enjoy your life together. In any relationship, if you can stay focused on them and not on what they're doing to you, you can bring them right back in the fold. People get mad, leave a church. Well, if you love them, they can come back. And the same way within a family. Kids get upset with their parents. Couples get upset with each other. They'll separate. They'll do those kinds of things. But if they'll keep focused on each other, they can come back together. And if you let them go with open arms, they can come back with open arms.
3 days left on earth, what do you do?
I would take all of my money and make the largest feast for my kids and my grandkids and my mother. And I could have my brother and his wife and my sisters and their husbands and all their kids and have 3 days of feasting and time together to be able to tell them goodbye. Having family time is an important part.
That sounds nice.
Pray as you age. Keep active. My son told me if I'm retiring, not to just sit around at home. Keep active doing something. So I'm still working 2 small jobs. Helps keep me out of the house. Helps keep me busy. Helps me to make a little extra money. But you need to keep active. But also as you age, you might want to check into your spirituality and get to know the Maker. Because one of these days you're going to meet him. And hopefully you're friends. 80. I think I feel my age. I'm 65. I'm probably going downhill faster than a lot of people because of hard work. It's just part of it, being ready to go home. The most difficult one was my father, because I was busy taking care of a customer. And my son calls me and says, "Grandpa thinks he's having a heart attack." And I told him, "Don't worry about it. He's kind of a hypochondriac." And then later that evening when I got there, sure enough, he'd had a heart attack, but wouldn't go to the hospital. He was so weak from the heart attack that I had to pick him up off the toilet, which was very embarrassing to him, and got him back to his chair. And when my mother got back in town, she took him to the hospital. The doctors had always said they couldn't figure out how he could live as long as he did, because he had so much asbestos in his lungs. But I held that against myself for years, and I probably suffered depression for 5 years that my father had died. And even though we each got to tell him goodbye, there was a point when he just would have one heartbeat on the monitor at a time. And my brother and youngest sister hadn't gotten there yet. And I told him, "Dad, Tony and Trevor are coming. If you can just hold on." And his heartbeat came back, and he lived long enough for them to come in and talk to him. And then 6 o'clock in the morning, each one of us told him goodbye. We stepped out of the room. I was the next to the last, and my mom pitched him on the toes and said, "Herbie, I love you." As she walked out the door, he had his last heartbeat.
Wow, that's incredible. That he got to say goodbye to everybody. That he hung on for that. That's cool. That's really cool.
One of the last things you lose when you're dying is your hearing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's wild.
You know, in helping people as they're going through the dying process, you have to deal with it. And really the difficult part is dealing with the family members that are so heartbroken over the loss of their loved ones. Just like the loss of my dad, the loss of my grandma. It wasn't so hard for me with the loss of Kim's grandma, because I'd only known her for, 3 years. But at the same time, it was Kim's grandma, and it was difficult for her and her sister dealing with that. But, it's just something you just got to hate to use the term grin and bear it, but that's pretty much what you got to do, is just accept the fact that that is part of life. Death is just a part of life. That is your time to go to the next journey, and just want to be ready. Well, in the old days, when someone would die, we'd all gather at the cemetery and watch them lower them into the ground. And generally, you want to have an open casket so the loved ones can tell the one that's passed goodbye, and they can physically see that, yes, they are dead. That helps them go through the dying process. Some people will go and be cremated immediately, and their loved ones don't really get to see them when they're gone, which makes it kind of tough for some of them. So don't be asking me about those kind of things, because then I'm going to be hurting you guys when I'm cremated. Anyway, but helping them to remember good times. Some people come out of horrid families, and so they don't have very many good memories. But if you can help them think of a few, that can help them work through it. But oftentimes they have regret because they've resented that person their whole life, or they've hated them, or they have said mean things to them and never talked to them again. People need to communicate while everybody's still alive. And that's the best way to deal with dying.
Approach it head on.
Huh?
To approach it head on.
Yep, approaching death head on and realizing they're leaving this earth, but they will be in a different place. Hopefully in a good place. When we're passing on, we get to meet the Maker.
Sure. I mean, it's...
And we hope he's not sitting there in judgment, and instead sitting there with open arms.
Right. Hope he's loving like we were trying to be.
Yeah.
Like, oh, man, shoot. Did I do that right?
Because when I was a kid, or, when I was a teenager going to the Salvation Army, it was pretty much hell and brimstone. You're sinful, you're going to hell, you need Jesus in your life. But they didn't teach us about love. Not really. And so, it's taken years in my life to realize that God really does love me. And he loves everybody. That's why he sent Jesus. Jesus went through hell so we could have heaven.
Yeah.
Time to wake up. I'm very thankful for my wife and my 3 kids. And real thankful for my grandkids, which I have another one coming in a few days. Hopefully. Goodbye, world.